Welcome, welcome, welcome. Going to get started shortly. Thanks for being ready and on time. Begin very soon. Good afternoon. Did I say morning? I did say morning, didn't I? Yeah, you're right. It is an afternoon. I don't know what I'm doing. Good afternoon, everybody. Good night. Almost. Last class of the day, guys. Last class of the day. Come on in. Let's get ready. Let's get our notes ready. Slides already up.
Is that Mr. Cavazos?
How's it going, Gio? It is. What's up?
Nothing much. I start my job today.
Oh, yeah? Where you working at?
Pizza Hut.
Nice. Which one?
Zasamora and military.
Okay. What time you go in today?
4.
Not bad, not bad.
Yeah.
Look at that, right after class ends. It's like perfect timing.
Yeah.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Let us know how.
I'm by myself today. I'm literally going to be the only server.
Nice.
So.
That seems good. I think you got this. Make sure you wear a mask.
Oh, yeah, I know. I gotta find mine.
Probably should. All right, guys, it is 2:25. It is 2:25. So while we're waiting for everybody, oh, you know what? I didn't send the Teams message. That might be what it is. Okay, so while we're waiting for everybody else to come in, let's go ahead and get our notes ready so that we're ready to go and ready to start. I'll give you about a minute and a half for the objective and the key terms. While you're getting that down, start thinking about that answer to that do now question. What happened after Lincoln was elected in 1860? Why did that happen? Start thinking about that. So about a minute and a half, make sure the objective is down, right? We're talking about the factors that contributed to the start of the Civil War. We're not quite at the war yet, but we are going to get there. Make sure that you have the terms, very short list of terms today. We're talking about the Dred Scott decision. Remind you of what secession is. Then we're going to get into the strengths and weaknesses of the Union and the Confederacy. So about another minute. Those of you that are filing in, make sure that you have your terms ready to go. Some life decisions being made in the chat that I'm not sure are the best ones. All right. So you shouldn't love debt. All right. So that's the clock. So now I'm going to give you 45 seconds to answer the question up there. Type it in the chat and answer. You can answer it publicly or privately. What happens right after Lincoln is elected president, like right after, and then try to tell me why. So I've got a couple of good responses already. No, not quite. So some people are a little too ahead. He's not shot till 65. What happens right after? I've got 2 people that are right up there. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. We're reminding. So again, everybody needs to respond to this. What's going on? What happens? I've got a couple of South is upset. I've got a couple of South secedes. What else? What happened? If that's what happened, who can tell me the state? because it's one state that starts this whole mess. And if you can't tell me the state, then just say, I don't know. What's the name of the state? Not Georgia. Not Georgia, but close. Yeah, close. It's like right on the border of Georgia. No? I should see some no's if we don't know. Ooh, it's not Virginia either. Virginia comes later. Virginia's in the second group, I believe, to secede. South Carolina, there we go. Yep, South Carolina is the one that secedes. South Carolina is the first state to leave. And why do they leave? Well, they're mad about Lincoln being elected. Why does Lincoln getting elected upset all of the Southerners and specifically the people in South Carolina? Why? What is he that they don't like? What does he believe in that they don't like? I see they want their slaves, but what is he? He's an abolitionist, right? So there we go. So he's the first president that's elected that is a true abolitionist, right? He admits it. He's open about it. And one thing I will say about him that is specific, or not specific, but important here, he's elected president without a single vote from the South. So basically none of the Southern states voted for him. He didn't win any of the Southern states. He didn't get any of the electoral votes. And on some states, he wasn't even on the ballot. And he still wins. And that is a big reason why Southern states start to secede, because they feel like he's a president that didn't represent them. And they're very upset about that. Now, mind you, why are they upset? Because he's an abolitionist but I want to point out, he doesn't at any point say, I'm going to take your slaves away, but, people perceive that. So let's get into this. Before we get into the tail of the tape in the Civil War, we're going to talk about wow, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Before we get into the Civil War, we're going to talk about the Dred Scott decision. We should have talked about it last week, but I didn't have enough time. I want to make sure that we had time because that's an important one. So let's get into, complete brain fart. I don't know what's going on there. So we're talking about the Dred Scott decision first. So that's our first key point. All right. The Dred Scott decision, 1857, write down the date, is a landmark Supreme Court case that impacted the issue of race in the United States and slavery, race and slavery. So you might want to add slavery there. So I'll give you a quick minute and a half. This is a major, major, major decision, and it comes right before the Civil War. It's like right on the heels. Right on the heels of the Civil War happening is when this comes up. We are going to talk about the, the case right now. We're going to get into the background, and then we're going to get into the actual decision itself. But first, the background. Has anybody heard of the Dred Scott case? Just a really quick yes or no. While you're writing, if you can. Just a quick yes, no. Even a Y or an N will work. I got one person that responded. Come on, guys, let's go. Let's go. No. A couple of no's. A couple of yeses. I've heard the name Dred Scott. Don't think so. No, I don't. So you would have heard about it way back when. I'm just curious. I'm just trying to test the waters. Think I've heard about it? No? Okay. So, yeah, we're going to get into this. Another 30 seconds. If you need more time than that, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on. Appreciate y'all responding, those of you that did. Yeah, that is not the same thing. The name should be familiar, and it's one of those, familiar sounding names. All right, let's move forward then. Let's get into this. So the background of the Dred Scott case. Don't write all this word per word. Don't write it word per word. I'll tell you which parts you need to focus on. But Dred Scott is an enslaved African American. He lived in the free states of Illinois and Wisconsin with his owner. And I put that in quotes because you can't own a person, but that's a personal thing getting in there. So after he got married, he offered to buy his freedom. And upon being refused, he took his case to court. He sues his owner. And initially at the state level, Scott won his case and he was declared free and he was able to go because he was in a free state. However, 2 years later, the Supreme Court reversed the decision. So what do you need to know? Dred Scott, enslaved man, gets married, tries to buy his freedom. when his owner doesn't want to give him that freedom or sell it to him, the slave sues the owner. He sues his owner, and at the state level, he wins his case. At the state level, he's declared free because he's in a free state, and the free states are like, yeah, you can't own a person. What's wrong with you? But the Supreme Court of the United States, that Supreme Court, same one, or actually it's the Missouri State Court, but then it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will say no, and they'll reverse the decision. The Supreme Court will reverse the decision, and then it's going to move on to the next level, which is the Supreme Court. So the state court, Supreme Court goes from there, because there's local all the way up to state Supreme and then federal Supreme. So what do you need? You need who he was, and you need what he did, which means sued his owner for freedom, gets it, and then the decision's reversed. He sues his owner for freedom, gets it, and then the decision's reversed. That's the background for the Dred Scott case. So about 2 minutes. Again, you don't need all of the detail word for word. This is in the slides, and the slides already posted. So all you need is that background, just brief what it was. So about 2 minutes in case you want to add a little bit of detail, but he's awarded freedom for a little bit, and then the decision's reversed. And I don't have the names of the art up here today, but that was his wife that he married. Those are some portraits. This is going to be a big deal, this case, for a lot of reasons. One reason I should say is that the Supreme Court is going to take this event and it is going to overextend, we'll say. And we'll get into how and why in a second. So while you guys are getting this, if I were to say that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court right now, when I say right now, I mean 1857, is a Jacksonian Democrat, what are they going to fall under? What are they probably going to do with this case? They're going to give the guy the freedom, or are they going to keep him a slave? Or at least rule that he should stay a slave? If the Chief Justice is a Jacksonian Democrat, what are they probably going to do? Slave, keep him as a slave, keep him as a slave. Yeah, you guys are right. Jacksonian Democrats, typically Southerners, very much support slavery. And so, anybody need more time? It's about 2 minutes. I'm going to move forward. What you're going to see in this decision is that. So let's move forward. So the decision, again, not word per word. It's a landmark case. You've already written that down. You don't need to write it again. It ruled that blacks, African Americans, could not be citizens of the United States. So that's the first ruling. So the first thing that happens is the court rules, hey, African Americans, not citizens, you can't sue people. That's the first part. Then it goes on to declare that the Missouri Compromise's ban on slavery is unconstitutional. Banning slavery was akin to taking property without just compensation. So first thing it does, says, hey, African Americans, you're not citizens. So you can't sue people, you can't. So this whole thing is, it's mute, right? It's irrelevant. Then, so there the case should end. But then the next step, they ban the Missouri Compromise's slavery ban. They make it unconstitutional. And if you don't remember, when Missouri became a state, they made that compromise line, which means no slave states above this line. Well, this decision overturns that. It makes that ruling unconstitutional, and it uses the horrible analogy of it's like taking property without paying for it. So what happens there is Western territories now become open to slavery. All those new territories in the West that we got from a war with Mexico. You remember the name of that treaty after we beat Mexico in that war? What was that treaty called? Come on, somebody's got to know it. Somebody's got to either shout it out or type it in. That's the second half. What's the first half? Hidalgo's the second half. You got to know the whole thing. It's 1848. It's a date. Guadalupe Hidalgo. There we go. Yes. So all that territory, as well as every other territory in the West that hadn't become a state, but they did buy the land. They paid money. Yeah, they were like, here's a little bit of money, and then we're taking a whole bunch of land. It's not so much that they bought it as much as they were like, hey, you're going to give us land, and we're going to give you money so that way other countries don't judge us. It's kind of what happened. Because remember, they took over all of Mexico, and in that war. They captured the capital and all that stuff. So don't think of it as a fair buy. The Gadsden purchase is more of like a purchase. That's more of a buy. But the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, it's like, here's a little bit of money. And we're going to take your land now. Okay, cool. All right. And, Mexico doesn't really have much to say about that. So then all those new territories are open to slavery. And the balance of slave and free states, remember I showed you that Thanos meme of the knife on the fingers? That balance is in danger. And it's going to stay in danger until bang, bang, Civil War. So what do you need here? You need the you need the first part of the decision, right? African Americans, not citizens. You need the second part, banning slavery is unconstitutional. And then for the third thing, Western territories are now open to slavery. And if you need to connect it all, then add in the second part, right? The balance of free and slave states is dangerous now, if you need it. And I would recommend putting it in case, so that way you don't forget that. So about 2 minutes, so you can get that info down in your notes. And then we'll move forward. If you have any questions, let me know. Feel free to stop me or to ask me. So again, two big parts here, and we're going to get more into the decision a little after. But this decision's a big deal. It's going to take a whole amendment of the Constitution to fix this. Does anybody know the name and the number for that amendment? I'm just curious if you remember those. And you can put no if you don't remember. But what do you think? Do you remember that number that made everybody citizens? Ooh, not quite. We're going to talk about it later. I was just curious. Those of you that responded, I appreciate that. Anybody else? Yes, no, maybe? Not quite. No. No, it's an amendment, not a compromise, an amendment. Nope. Okay. So basically, I'll say this really quick because we're going to talk about this later. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments all have to do with the same topic, and they all happen right after the Civil War. 13th freed the slaves. 14th makes everybody citizens, and the 15th makes all citizens vote, except women, not women yet. So the way to remember it's free citizens vote, right? So free citizens vote, 13, 14, 15. It's a good way to look at it. We'll get into that more later, but they always ask you about those three. Those three are important to remember. Free citizens vote. But let's go to move on. It's been about 2.5 minutes. So more, again, don't write all this word per word, except for that first bullet point. You need the Chief Justice's name, Roger B. Taney, Jacksonian Democrat. So you're right in the sense that the 13th Amendment has to do with that topic, but the 13th Amendment freed the slaves. It doesn't have anything to do with citizenship. 13th Amendment did one thing. Just like the 14th Amendment made them citizens. It didn't do anything else. Just like the 15th Amendment let all citizens vote. Didn't do anything else, right? They work together, but they're separate amendments. So in a sense. So again, Chief Justice Roger Taney, Jacksonian Democrat. All throughout this pre-Civil War and into the Civil War era, you get this guy here being a Jacksonian Democrat doing Jacksonian things. One reason the decision is so offensive to Northerners, if you couldn't tell, is that it's one topic. It's a very specific lawsuit. And right away, the first thing they do is say, hey, you're not a citizen, you can't sue people. So by that logic, the whole case should have ended there. It should have ended right there, right? By their twisted and racist logic, it should have ended. But it doesn't. And instead, the court takes that, and Taney and his court take this, and they make a sweeping decision and legal change that extends beyond the scope of the case to do what to slavery? What are they doing with slavery by that decision? This decision does what for slavery in the West and in the Union? Somebody tell me, what does it do to slavery? Expands it, makes it grow, right? It makes slavery stronger. The hold of slavery is stronger. It was something that was weakening for a little while is getting stronger now. And by this point, it's not weakening anymore, but that was a 1790s issue, right? So what, by their own logic, this case should have ended without slavery expanding, but instead the court under Taney takes this moment and expands, or strengthens, I should say, slavery's hold in the West and in other territories. So you need that third bullet point and add somewhere in there, right, the whole thing about by their own logic, right, that whole first point, hey, you're not a citizen, you can't sue people, is in there. That's the first thing they say. They make sure to tell him he's not a citizen. You can't sue people. This whole case is thrown out. But then they go on to double make sure that they strengthen slavery's hold in the Union. And you got to blame Taney. Make sure you have his name, Roger B. Taney, Chief Justice. Add that he's a Jacksonian Democrat. That's important. Okay, so about another minute and change on here. Then we're going to move on. If there's any questions, let me know. We're going to have one more topic on the Dred Scott, and then we're going to move on to the next key points in our next topic for the day, which is the sort of tail of the tape between the Union and the Confederacy. While we're waiting on people to finish up notes, somebody want to tell me how the South probably felt about this whole decision? Yeah, pretty much. Why? Who wants to tell me why? You can come off mute and say it, or you can just type it in. Why? Why is the South so happy about this? Why are they so excited? More slavery, economy. So can let's say Southern plantation owner, can they expand into the Western territory and buy more land and plant more cotton if there's no slavery in those territories? But can they do it if there's no slavery? No, right? So to a Southern plantation owner, spread of slavery also means the spread of their financial profit, as horrible as that is. So yes, they're very happy about it. One, because slavery spreads, but it's more the meaning behind the slavery spreading, right? More money in their pockets. That's funny. I agree. That is exactly, that character from that movie would exactly be doing that when you heard this case. I was probably very happy about that when this case happened, because I believe that movie happens right after this case, because it's right before the Civil War, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. Okay, last Dred Scott slide. It's received really well in the South, as you guys already said, right? The South loved this decision. They were super happy. The North is outraged. They feel like slavery is being legalized everywhere. They already have to deal with the Fugitive Slave Act, so they're not happy. They argued that if a slave remained a slave while in a free state, there can be no laws against slavery, and that slavery is effectively permitted everywhere. You pretty much need this whole last bit. You get the Northern frustrations, and you get this just confirmation, right, that the South is really happy about this decision. And again, the North argues, and what do you guys think? Do you think they're right? If a slave remains a slave while in a free state, then technically slavery is allowed everywhere. Is that true? Is that false? What do you think? This one, I want everybody to, that question I want everybody to answer. What do you think? Yes or no? Is that true or is that false? 62 people, I should see 63 trues or falses. And I'm just asking you, it's up to you. What do you think? There's no like wrong answer. I'm curious about what your opinions think. So when you get the notes, make sure you put that in. That would be true. I see some trues, sadly true. The question is, do you agree with that last statement, right? That if a slave remains a slave in a free state, then technically there is slavery allowed everywhere. You can't make a law against slavery if a slave remains a slave even when they're in a free state. I know that's kind of a mouthful, but that's the argument the North is making. See a lot of truths. All right, yeah. I honestly think you guys are right. I mean, it's one of those things that's really, 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 really unfair. Doesn't do it quite justice, but it's one of those like slaps in the face that when you're a student of American history, you look at, and every now and then it'll slap you in the face, especially this era. And that's one of them, when the Supreme Court actively does something to make sure that they spread slavery, even though they really didn't have the authority to do that. That's not what the case was about. So another minute, 20 seconds or so on this last one, then we'll move on to the next key points. Next thing we're going to talk about is the strengths and weaknesses of the two sides of the Civil War. So we're going to talk about that next, about 30 seconds. All right, get ready to move on. So, key point 2. Both the Union and the Confederacy will mobilize their economies and societies ready to wage war in 1861, even while facing considerable home front opposition. So, even though people on both sides living in both places were unhappy and kind of against the idea of going to war, starting a civil war, both sides will get ready for war, and war will come in 1861. So it's going to happen very quickly, especially for this time period. And what you're going to see for the first time is not quite modern, but closer to modern style war fighting, where things happen faster. Everything's going to be bigger. Everything's going to be more complicated. And everything's going to be, how should I put it, deadlier. And you're going to see why and how in a second, especially tomorrow when we actually go to war and start talking about this stuff. But right now we're just setting up. It's the tail of the tape, right? Like when you see a boxing match and you got like everybody's height and their weight and all that stuff. That's what we're doing. We're going to talk about the infrastructure, and what each side has going for them and what each side has going against them. New power response. Not quite nukes, but close. In fact, there's going to be a lot of European observers from places like Germany and England and I believe France at this war, because back then that's what people did. Like world leaders would go and watch when fights happened to see kind of what it was like, to know what stuff they'd want to buy, what stuff they'd want to not use, things like that. So there will be some at this war, famously. No, see, well, they do it all the time. Like we do it. We did it during the Franco-Prussian War, which not Franco-Prussian. I'm sorry. The oh my God, what's that war called? The Russo-Japanese War. We did it during the Russo-Japanese War, which was like in 1908. It's like right before the First World War. So another 30 seconds or so. So yeah, people, that's what it's kind of what they're doing. That, Jonathan, that's kind of what it's like. They're watching the loadouts. They're seeing what works. Like, oh, that weapon system works. This weapon system doesn't. Hey, maybe we should buy more of these tank things, like stuff like that. And you'll see it right before the world wars start. You see it happening in every little conflict to see like, hey, those machine gun things kind of cool, right? Maybe we should buy more. It's stuff like that. Because people don't know what'll work and what won't until you see it in actual warfare. And pre-world wars, countries just went to war for reasons. We're going to get into this later, but it's just a thing you did. You went to war every now and then. You know, you wanted land, you wanted this, you went to war. That's what people did. Oh man, tomorrow's going to be fun. There's Americans that did that for this war right away at the start. You know, England, so basically all of Europe is thinking about getting involved in this war. And they might have gotten involved in this war if Lincoln hadn't made it about slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation. They might have actually intervened to try to help the Confederates because the Confederates were holding cotton hostage. Because remember, the U.S., southern U.S. produces 90% of the world's cotton. And the Confederates are blockaded. And Lincoln's like, you can't have any. Sorry. And we're going to get into all that when we get into the war. But so it's interesting. But so let's talk about the Union. Let's talk about their advantages. The Union is in what part of the United States? Region-wise. North. That's the last time you're going to say North. They're the Union now. Don't refer to them as North and South. Refer to them as Union and Confederacy. But thank you for responding. They're the North. They're the Union. Again, last time we say North, they're the Union. When you hear me say Union, I'm talking about the North. Let's talk about some of their advantages. Industry. They have all of the industry in the United States practically. What are useful resources during a war? Just type them in. What do you think? What could be useful when you're fighting a war? What do you need? Ammo. What else? Arms, food. What else? Technology. Okay. What else? Guns. People. That's a good one. What else you need? You need people to fight the war. Medicine. Okay. Shelter. Okay. Clothes. Yep. What else? Anything else? Think about it. What else you need? Muskets. Yeah. Armor. Okay. So you need tools to fight the war. You need people to fight the war, trained soldiers. I saw technology in there. I saw shelter. I saw food. Food is good. Battle plans. I'll give you battle plans. So you need a lot of different things, right? Battle plans is a good one. As far as industry goes, the Union has almost all of it. So the North had more money. They had more people. They had more weapons, ammunition, food, goods, supplies, anything you can think of that would be useful for fighting a war, with the exception of battle plans and leaders. The Union had more of it. They had way more money. They had most of the factories. And this chart actually gives you a good example of the amount of people they had or workers they had available, factories they had, money, miles of railroad track. This is going to matter more than it ever had before. Textiles, ability to make uniforms, warm clothes, firearms, weapons, and iron, raw stuff. So the Union just had more of everything, way more of everything. That's not all you need to win a war, but it's hard to win a war if you don't have any guns or people to shoot them. So I would get that first point and then get some of the specifics. Talk about money. Talk about having people. Somebody earlier put people, and that was like really good, right? Talk about just guns and ammo, but you also need food. And despite what you might think about fertile growing soil and all that stuff, the Union is going to have more food, and we'll get into why soon. So I'll give you a quick minute and a half for this slide, and then we're going to move on. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. By the way, all these figures on these charts are how much you make. Not so much how much you have, but how much can be made. Like 97% of firearms, for example, are manufactured in the North. That's just the way it worked. About 30 seconds, and then we're going to move on to the next Union advantage. So one thing they got going for them, the Union, all the industry, all located within the Union, pretty much. Very small amounts of industry are located elsewhere. Wow. So now let's move forward. Food stocks. The North, and again, don't say North, the Union actually had more farms than the Confederates did. The Confederate farms are all about cash crops, right? Giant, huge plantations, cash crops. That's all they grew. That's all they made. Cash crops. And most cash crops you can't eat, especially because pretty much all everybody grew by 1860 was cotton. There's a few other ones, right? Like rice is edible. That's considered a cash crop. But there's very little of that. There's definitely not enough to feed the entire Confederacy. So whereas in the Union, all the farms are for food. That's all they are, right? If you think old, when you think like original 13 colonies, like the 3 regions, right? The middle colonies, right? These colonies right up here, these states have all the food. They were the breadbasket, and they're still the breadbasket. So when you look at total farms in 1860 in the United States, look at all of these food farms in what would be the breadbasket, right? It's all in the Union. It's all in the North. And Ohio's a border state, but that's not the point, right? They're all in the Union. We don't have data here because these are territories, not states. But all of the foodstuffs, that's what you'd call it, foodstuffs. It sounds funny, but that's what you would call it, is in the Union. So the Confederacy, one, they don't have industry. But when you get down to wartime planning and wartime economies and wartime governing, you find out they don't have much food either. It's going to be hard for them to feed themselves as well. They're not going to starve to death, but some people might, because they're going to be struggling to feed a country. It's hard to feed a country. You need a lot of food for that, especially in the 1860s. So again, get that down. Basically, all of the prime, great, amazing farmland in the Confederacy is being used for cash crops, whereas any piece of farmable land in the Union is pretty much being used for foodstuffs. Big difference there. So about a minute and change for there. Put it down to be. The people that live in the Confederacy will very quickly realize that maybe this whole be your own country based in slavery thing's not going to work out. Especially when Tecumseh Sherman burns down half of Georgia. But we'll get to that Thursday. Maybe Thursday. We might have to do it Friday, but I think we'll get to it Thursday. So, but imagine eating cotton. Yeah, I don't think you could eat cotton. Yeah, that wouldn't be very delicious. They probably should have made some of those plantation owners eat some cotton. Maybe they would have thought twice about their decisions, but yeah, it's pretty much going to be that. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough for them. And again, the whole Confederate plan is called something. They use the term King Cotton. They use this term called King Cotton, where their whole plan is, hey, Europe, help us fight war, please. Cotton, yeah, want? And then, Lincoln threatens all of Europe. And then when that looks like it might not be enough, he makes the war about slavery, and Europe's like, yeah, never mind. Because again, everybody's okay with American slave use when they don't have to confront it, right? Once it's like, hey, you want to fight a war to preserve our slavery, keep those cotton prices low for you, then the European countries are going to have a problem, because pre that, they don't really have a problem. Everybody's buying their cotton from the South, which is why I always say, right, it's a world sin. It's a horrible thing. Donovan, pretty much. So when we get into the Confederates in a second, we're going to talk about how they have certain things going for them. And early on, when we talk about the war, you'll see that this actually works, where anytime you're fighting a war against a country that has more stuff than you, more money than you, and more people than you, the only way you win it is if you win it fast and you make them quit. And that's the Confederates' initial battle plan. That's why they do a lot of fighting in the upper regions of the Confederacy, like up here. That's their plan. That's Lee's plan. And it's not going to work out. The longer the war goes on, it's kind of like Japan and the Second World War. Like the longer it's going to go on, they're going to lose because they're a tiny country. It's the same concept. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's not going to work for them. So Union infrastructure, one more thing on the Union. They had an advanced network of, this is how you travel in the Union, all rail lines, fast, quick, instant, easy. Telegraph lines for communication, fast, quick, instant, easy. What does that mean? It means Lincoln in DC, where's DC? Up here, I believe, can communicate with the entire army via telegraph line and talk to them in real time. Late in the war, when Grant's in charge, he'll be able to talk to Grant like every night and talk about the game plan and figure out what's going on. And the South, the Confederacy does not have that. I said South again. The Confederacy does not have that going for them. They do not have all those awesome communication lines. Not that Jefferson Davis is as good of a wartime leader as Lincoln was, but Jefferson Davis, if he wanted to, could not be talking to Lee and figuring out a game plan. Lee cannot talk to his other generals and figure out a game plan, but Grant can. Grant's not going to be the leader in the beginning, but by the time Grant is the leader, he can do that, and he will. Same with railroad lines. You find out for the first time that, hey, railroads transporting fast kind of matters because you can get soldiers that are up here training, let's say, way down here, really fast. So railroad lines become a big thing. So do the factory workers. So do telegraph lines. And the Union has all of it. More of it. Vast majority more than the Confederacy does. So a quick minute on there, and then we'll move on. But it's starting to become very clear, if you hadn't noticed, right, that it's going to be really hard for the Union to win this war, to lose this war, I'm sorry. And in fact, early on, the first couple of years, it seems almost like they're trying to lose it by some of the decisions they make. But this war is inevitably going to be won by the Union the longer that it takes to be finished. It's kind of unwinnable for the Confederates the longer it goes. They don't have the supplies. They don't have the people. In fact, it's going to be one of Grant's strategies late in the war is, hey, Lee can't replace his soldiers. I can. As horrible as that sounds and as horrible as that makes him sound, it's part of why he's able to win. He keeps attacking. It's one of those warfare things that comes into play. And Grant, it's part of what makes Grant such a good wartime leader. What makes him win the war is that he's willing to do that. As horrible as that sounds and as horrible as it is for the people on the ground. He's willing to attack when other generals were not. And he attacks and he attacks and he attacks. But we'll get into that in the next couple of days when we start talking about the war. Right now we're just talking about the settings. But as you can tell, I get into the conversation a little too much. So let's move on. Just take a look at this so you can see. This is the resources comparatively between the Union and the Confederates. The yellow, gold, whatever that color is the Confederates and the blue is the Union. Population, 2.5 to 1. Male population, 4 to 1. Let's move. Corn production, 2 to 1. Wheat production, 4 to 1. Livestock, 1 to 1, 1.5 to 1. Not as big of a one difference there. Firearm production, 32 to 1. Naval ship tonnage, how big your Navy is. That's how you weigh navies, by the way, in tonnage. 25 to 1. Anything else here? Railroads, 2.5 to 1. Merchant ships, 9 to 1. Not that merchant ships matter because the Navy's going to blockade the Confederates, but you get the idea. So Union, way more stuff than the Confederates, but cotton, no. Yeah, cotton production's about all that they have going for them. The Union's 1 to 24 Confederate cotton. That's about it. So let's talk about the Confederate advantages. Can't be cotton, though. That's what the Confederates thought. That's what the Confederates thought. It's like, we got all the cotton, we're okay. And then, they weren't. But there is one thing that the Confederates have that is by far their biggest and best advantage. These other advantages that we'll talk about, technically their advantages, we'll include them. But the biggest thing that they have going for them is leadership. The Confederates have by far the most experienced, the most naturally gifted, and what battle and war will prove just the better leaders. They do. And these leaders will straight up, when the Confederate splits off, they will abandon the Union and join the Confederate military. Robert E. Lee being one of them. Another guy by the name of Stonewall Jackson being another. Jeb Stuart, Longstreet. These are all really, really, really good leaders. A lot of them are the ones that have experience. Robert E. Lee's the guy that stopped John Brown. And it is their biggest advantage. It's why they will win the war in the beginning. They will be winning the war for the first 2 to 3 years. The Confederates are winning and the Union just can't get a victory, like not win a battle, right? It's like a blowout victory, it seems like. And it's partly because of the leadership. This is Stonewall Jackson right here. If you've ever heard somebody like the reference to Stonewall Jackson, we're talking about that. And we'll talk about where he gets the nickname from tomorrow when we get into the war, because he gets it pretty early on. Fun fact, Stonewall Jackson will be killed by his own Confederates. He built the stone wall, not literally, but figuratively he did. Figuratively, right? It's a pretty self-explanatory name. He basically, there's like a, what is it? I'm talking about it now. See what I do? A Union force that's like 3-4 times the size of his force, and they attack him and he repels them like a stone wall. And he makes the Union force run away, even though he's got the smaller force. And that's where he gets the nickname from. At Manassas, the first Manassas, actually. So I'll give you a quick minute. Again, South had the best leaders. Name a couple of the leaders. Make sure you name Lee. Make sure you name Jackson. He's a different breed. These guys overall are some. No, Longstreet, that's his last name. I believe Longstreet, that's his last name. No, Longstreet, I do not believe is that guy's nickname. I think he was a cavalry officer. No, we didn't let people walk on him. So again, about 45 seconds. By far, South has the best generals, and not all are all these guys. Longstreet, I don't think is a general, but best leaders, best leadership. I don't know why I put generals there. Jeb Stuart, Lee, and Jackson are generals. I don't think Longstreet was. You don't need to put Thomas. You can just put Stonewall Jackson, but if you want to put the Thomas, you can. Just know Stonewall Jackson, because you won't hear him referred to as Thomas Jackson. Like they all refer to him as Stonewall. So you don't need his first name being Thomas. Yeah, no, Isaac, sorry, I don't get that reference. I'm sure it's a funny one though. All right, let's move on. Home field advantage. Second thing that the Confederates have going for them is home field advantage. Most of the battles will be fought in the Confederacy, within the southern United States, in the Confederacy. So they know the land. They can resupply and reinforce quickly from the surrounding area because typically they're in friendly territory. And they're able to maintain defensive positions other than being offensive. Part of why it'll look like the Confederates are winning and why they win all the battles early on is because the Confederates get to sit there and defend themselves, whereas the Union is the one that has to attack. And typically, especially in the beginning, the leadership does not want to attack. And when they do attack, they do it half-heartedly. And when you're going to do something like attack, you can't half-ass attacking. If you're not going to attack full on, it's not going to go well. And the bad leadership thinks they can pull stuff off like that, and they can't. And it's part of why in the early years, in the early battles, the Confederates just win. It's like not even close, the contest. It's funny to look back at how bad the Union loses early on. And part of it is because of the bad leadership. Bad leadership in a military setting it affects it in more ways than you'd think. It's really important. Leadership, decision making and stuff, being able to keep calm, collected, being able to press advantages, and it's things that the first Union general can't do. And we'll talk about him tomorrow for sure. McClellan. It's not that everyone dies, but they, especially during this time period, because you guys, later on in more modern times, warfare changed, but during this time period, it's about taking fields and taking land. It's not about killing the other guys. It's about capturing fields. And in the Civil War, in the beginning of the First World War, and in the wars in between, you got this old school mentality of like march up, like, like the American Revolution, march up, you're in your fancy blue uniform, you line your guns up and you shoot at each other. And you have that mixed in with modern technology. In modern technology, you do that, and then, you're going to get everybody dying. And so it's a stopgap. This war is like in the middle. So it's a weird one. It's a weird conflict. So about a minute and a half on home field advantage, and then we'll move on. Almost done, guys.
And pick up the feed, bro.
About a minute left. One more slide after this, and we're good to go. All right, where are we at? 20 seconds and moving forward. All right, so let's go to move forward. And let's talk about the last thing, morale boost early on. The South had a cause they believed in, as horrible as that cause may or may not have been, and it was horrible. And Northerners, especially early on, don't really have a reason to fight. Some of them are like, hey, we want to preserve the, but really Northerners don't really care what's going on. They're just going to fight because people made them. And so that's going to matter on how hard everybody is and how hard everybody fights and how motivated and dedicated they are to the cause. And so early on, the Southern morale boost is a big, big help. Their fight is, in their eyes, their fight is for freedom itself, for their rights to live the way they want to live. And so in terms of willingness to fight, the South had way more of an advantage. I would get that second bullet point and then just add in there somewhere about the Union not being anywhere near as invested in their fight. No, this is the last slide. "20 seconds, or 30 seconds, sorry. Last slide right here. And then we are going to talk about the exit ticket. You'll have a little less than 10 minutes to get that done. All right, so exit ticket's already in Google Classroom. And here it is. Simple. SAQ. Identify and explain significance of the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott v. Sanford. Identify and explain 2 advantages of the Union and then 2 advantages of the Confederacy. That's it. Simple, easy peasy. Shouldn't take you more than the 8 minutes you got left. So I will be here in the call if you need anything for a while. Otherwise, guys, you are good to do your exit ticket. Make sure you have yourselves a great rest of your afternoon. I'll see you all tomorrow. If you have any questions, let me know. Tomorrow we will go to war. We will talk about the actual opening battles and stuff. Have a good one. See you guys.